In this video, I'll show you the best weapons in Elden Ring to absolutely dominate the game in 2025. We are ranking these monsters in a top 25 list based on the most recent updates up to patch 1.16. I picked each weapon using three main criteria: damage per second, ease of use, and how strong it gets at max scaling. We are going to start from A tier all the way up to broken tier. And hey, if your favorite weapon didn't make the list, tell us in the comment section why you love it so much. With that being said, let's jump straight into it. Number 25, Eleonora's Blade. If you haven't tried this weapon yet, then you're missing out on an extraordinary combat experience. This unique twin blade deals physical and fire damage while scaling off dexterity and arcane, which makes it very easy to use and build, but is really stamina hungry, so it also demands a lot of endurance. It has a unique R2 spinning attack that hits several times in rapid succession, and if you charge the attack, it will make the weapon hit even more times. However, what makes this blade a special weapon is its unique skill, Bloodblade Dance. Not only is it a very stylish attack, but it's also incredibly powerful, because it deals massive stance damage while quickly reaching the max stages of the multi-hit talismans and the thorny tier. In addition, it has a great passive bleed build-up, pretty similar to the Rivers of Blood but slightly higher. Against enemies that can be staggered like Malenia, it's actually disgusting. Just by spamming the skill, you can drain their HP bars in seconds. Not to mention that it only takes a few hits of the skill to break any boss's stance and land a critical hit. In addition, if you wear the Dancer's armor set, you will deal 10% more damage when using this ability. Its major downside is that using this skill at short distance can conflict with the camera, sometimes missing multiple hits of the skill, and against heavily armored enemies it struggles to build consistent damage since the skill mostly deals slash attacks. Even so, it can easily carry you through multiple playthroughs and can be paired with similar bleed weapons. Number 24, Sword of Night. This katana has to be one of the hardest weapons to obtain, as it requires you to complete an entire questline in the late scenarios of the DLC. But I'm not complaining, cause after all that suffering, this blade coming as a reward is not a bad deal. It's a really unique weapon as it scales only with dexterity, but its damage is split between physical and magic. Though it's not a giant amount of magic damage, it's more than decent, and it's worth buffing with the magic Scorpion Charm and magic tier. Nonetheless, if you are aiming to get the most out of this blade, the multi-hit talismans and thorny tier will make it significantly stronger if you like to play aggressively. In the same way, it has a pretty cool double slasher to attack shared with the Serpent Bone blade, which makes it a really fast slashing machine. As you know, what I usually like the most about each weapon is its unique skill, and this case is no exception. But there are multiple things about Witching Hour Slash I'd like to point out. It is an extremely flashy ability, it looks amazing and feels great. However, it takes a lot of time to fully charge, and if it's used on charge, its damage isn't that great. And when it comes to successive attack builds, the idea is to keep the momentum while attacking, so multiple times you'll notice that the skill deals a lot of damage, and in other situations it won't be that good. But that happens because the timing between any attack and using the skill fully charged can be considerable. I'd say that's the only major flaw of this weapon, besides dealing mostly slash damage, which struggles a bit against heavy armors. But to be honest, you can't go wrong with this blade. Number 23, Darkmoon Greatsword. When it comes to legendary and iconic weapons, nothing can beat the Darkmoon Greatsword, an amazing blade that has been featured in almost every From Software game. It has been present since Demon Souls, the Dark Souls saga, Bloodborne, and we also have it here in Elden Ring. Which version you prefer is up to you, but the Darkmoon Greatsword is an absolute beast, capable of dealing huge damage against any type of target. As a greatsword is pretty normal. It has a regular moveset with unique R2 attacks, deals physical and magic damage, and scales mostly of intelligence with minimal scaling on dexterity and strength. The most important feature of this weapon is its unique skill, Moonlight Greatsword. It's an amazing ability that coats the weapon in a cold magic aura, increasing its damage and frostbite build up. It already sounds amazing, but it gets even better with the R2 attacks. While the buff is active, each heavy attack will shoot a massive magic projectile that travels a really long distance, dealing a lot of damage, stance damage, and frostbite. The magic waves are affected by the Shard of Alexander, and since these projectiles are chargeable, they are also affected by the Godfrey icon. Despite being chargeable attacks, they are not affected by the Axe Talisman or the Spy Crack tier. These tools will only increase the damage of the weapon's hitbox, which means they only work if you are close enough to the target when performing the heavy attack. Still, even then, they affect only the weapon, not the projectiles. This weapon is extremely powerful in almost every scenario. It will only struggle against enemies that are extremely resistant to magic damage. Renala is one of the toughest enemies to face with this weapon, as your damage will be dramatically reduced. I don't see this as a flaw, but the R2 attacks are slightly slower compared to the other greatswords. It's understandable considering they are designed to be used while the skill buff is active, but I think it's something important to be aware of when using this blade. Number 22, Obsidian Lamina. If you thought getting the Sword of Night was a challenge, hold tight, because to get your hands on this beautiful sight, you'll need to complete the Ansbach's questline in the DLC. In other words, you need to complete the Dem expansion and beat Consor Radahn to obtain obtain this fantastic weapon. Is it worth it? Absolutely! The Obsidian Lamina is pretty similar to the Bloody Helice. It deals only physical damage and is built around dexterity and arcane. Its passive bleed build-up is quite decent and effective, but I'd rather not to focus on the bleed procs since this weapon has something better to offer. In the same way as the Bloody Helice, the unique skill of this weapon is split into 3 main inputs, 1 evasive maneuver and 2 different follow-ups. The Obsidian Lamina, however, was buffed in patch 1.14, increasing the speed, traveling distance, and stance damage of the first follow-up of Dynastic Sickle Play, as well as reducing its stamina cost. I really don't know why they did that, cause I played before the buff and it was already a powerful weapon. To be fair, the skill is a bit complicated to use if you're not very aware of your enemy's moveset or if you completely ignore how it works. In any case, what we can be sure is that once you get the trick of this ability, you'll notice how insanely broken it actually is. The first follow-up deals amazing damage, but it shines mostly with the stance damage, dealing the same stance damage as a fully charged greatsword R2 attack, but significantly faster. This allows you to easily use the second follow-up to deal additional damage and get to a safe area. This way you can control most difficult bosses while playing aggressively. It's a great weapon to run with multi-hit talismans and the Thorny tier, but it's also very useful and sometimes better if you run it as a critical hit weapon with the Dagger Talisman and the Blade of Mercy. In addition, if you wear the full Ansbach set, you will deal 15% more damage when using Dynastic Sickle Play. The only problem I see with this weapon is the skill itself. Sometimes the camera won't work properly and the follow-up attacks won't actually hit, and it also requires practice to get the timings right. So I will say it's a really complex weapon, but with enough practice, it melts anything it touches. Number 21, Greatsword. I just noticed that we are lacking of some raw power in this list. This weapon is one of the most versatile colossal swords in the game, since you can use it in multiple ways depending on which Ash of War you'd like to run. The most traditional way is using it in a strength build in the heavy affinity with Crackblade, Lion's Claw with Bloodflame Blade, or with Royal Knight's Resolve. And I like this traditional style. That's the point of this weapon, turning off the brain and going crazy with some wild attacks with no hesitation. Even if it sounds weird, I like to use this chunk of iron on the bleed affinity, cause as a colossal sword the bleed build-up will be massive, and thanks to the motion values of its attacks, we are gonna be proccing bleed multiple times, as if we were using some sort of fast multi-hit weapon. I prefer to use it with the Savage Lion's Claw Ash of War, cause it's like an upgraded version of the regular Lion's Claw. Initially it wasn't that good, since the first attack of the Savage Lion's Claw was weaker than the OG version, but they actually fixed that in patch 1.13, increasing the damage and the stance damage of this attack, making it in my opinion a better option now. The cool part is that with the humongous size of the weapon, you won't be missing any hits, and since we have a ridiculous bleed build-up, just with one full skill use will proc the status effect. I know I'm talking about an Ash of War that can be used on multiple weapons, but I actually wouldn't use it on any weapon other than the Godless Greatsword. I also like to equip the Freya's Greatsword in my character's offhand to increase the damage of this ability by 10%. I think the only downside of this weapon is its weight. You need a really high endurance investment to be able to wield the weapon with a decent armor set without surpassing the medium load, and if you're not really used to the recovery times of colossal swords, you might struggle a little bit, but aside from that, this giant piece of metal is a great choice. Number 20, Dancing Blade of Rana. You will soon notice that in this list we won't be seeing the traditional broken dual setups like Bandits and Scavengers curved swords or the dual Gargoyles twin blades, and that's simply because those builds are based on using 2 pieces of each weapon, so it's actually not fair to compare a power stance build among singular weapons. However, the DLC changed that dramatically, cause now we have a few weapons that grant us access to the power stance moveset of certain weapon classes without needing an additional copy of that weapon. In this case, we are taking a look at the Dancing Blade of Rana, one of the best curved swords introduced in Shadow of the Erdtree. It deals purely physical damage, scales only of dexterity, and is one of the earliest weapons we can get in the DLC. This is a paired weapon, which when two-handing it, instead of wielding the blade with both hands like it happens with most weapons, our character will equip a second duplicate weapon in their offhand. This way we get access to the destructive power stance moveset of the curved swords weapon class while only using a single curved sword. Moreover, this weapon features a really interesting unique skill named Unending Dance, which is basically that, a delightful dance composed of multiple slashing attacks that can be held as long as your stamina bar allows you to. Obviously, if you're a healthy person and you don't know each boss's moveset down to a science, it's a lot better if you focus on using the power stance moveset. I mean, it has been the easy mode of Elden Ring for years, and even if it doesn't have bleed, it doesn't matter, because the base damage is already amazing, and if you combine it with the multi-hit buffs, you will obliterate everything. However, the skill is not bad at all. I actually like to call it the boss blender, because that's exactly how it feels if you have enough space to sustain the skill for a significant amount of time, and if you wear the dancer set, you will be dealing even more damage. Which brings me to the biggest downside of this weapon. Curved swords are not the best weapon class when it comes to dealing stance damage, even if you two-hand one, and and this blade being a paired weapon prevents you from two-handing, harshly punishing your stance damage overall, which can increase the difficulty of finding openings to make effective use of the skill. Still, if you manage to counter this with any strategy you can think of, this blade might become one of your favorite weapons in the game. Number 19. Reduvia. Speaking about the stance damage, I will say that one of the weapon classes I like the least is daggers, not only because they have very short range and low base damage, but also because they deal terrible stance damage, reducing the control you have over each boss. If that's not bad enough, with a dagger you can even stagger light enemies on hit like you would with a straight sword or a katana. But there's always light at the end of the tunnel, and in this case we find it in the first 10 minutes of gameplay in Elden Ring. The Reduvia is the only dagger I trust my life to. This weapon, despite being a dagger, is so powerful and easy to use it compensates for the rest of the downsides I previously mentioned. This weapon relies completely on its unique skill, cause as a dagger it doesn't have enough range or base damage, but to be honest it has a sick design, it looks really cool. It scales mainly of arcane and dexterity, with arcane being the most important stat cause it increases the bleed build up, making the weapon more reliable. Reduvia Blood Blade is a swift attack that fires a blood projectile at short range, longer than melee range, and it can be repeated multiple times. This attack can be spammed at a very fast pace, which makes it perfect to pair with multi-hit talismans, thorny tear, and bleed buffs. Unlike the Bloodblade Ash of War, this one doesn't cost HP, it only consumes stamina and FP like any other ability. In addition, the Asbak set will increase the damage of the Reduvia Bloodblade by 15% when wearing the full set, which is amazing. The main downside of this weapon is that it's a dagger, but thanks to its unique skill it won't let you down even against the toughest enemies. Well, it might be good to mention that since the weapon is tied to its Ash of War, the gameplay can get repetitive quite fast. Number 18. Moonveil. This katana was nerfed multiple times to the point of being almost completely ignored by the community. In the DLC, they released the Relana's cameo talisman, which everyone thought would bring the Moonveil back to the meta, but it wasn't fast enough, and the damage bonus was so low that it was way better to keep spamming the skill of the Moonveil like we did back then. Nonetheless, in patch 1.14 they fixed Relana's talisman, increasing the damage bonus from 15% all the way up to 45%, and they also reduced the delay activation from 2 seconds to only 1 second, making a dramatic change in how stance abilities were used and turning most of them into completely broken abilities. And that change also affected the Moonveil, putting it back where she belongs, bringing back that iconic gameplay with the Transient Moonlight unique skill. The Moonveil works very well for multiple reasons. It deals physical and magic damage, scales of intelligence and dexterity evenly, which creates a destructive scenery with its unique skill. In this game, all the abilities that are based on shooting projectiles get a damage boost from dexterity, even if their main scale value is on a different attribute. Considering how well constructed the Moonveil is, and now having a decent buff to crank its damage up, we can destroy all enemies just by holding the blade for a really small gap of time. If we also use the Shard of Alexander with Relana's cameo, the next hit of Transient Moonlight will deal 67% more damage. Not to mention that Transient Moonlight can also be boosted with the Spellblade set, which increases the damage of magic abilities by 8% when using the full set. If built correctly, the Moonveil is one of the most reliable and effective weapons you can choose in this game. Number 17. Backhand Blade. I don't care if having reverse blades wouldn't work in real life. I don't see myself in a situation where I have to wield a machete like it's a katana, so I'm going to enjoy this weapon entirely. The Backhand Blade is the earliest weapon you can get in the DLC, and one of the most broken as well. And guess what? This is also a paired weapon, which means with only one you get another for free when two-handing it. Pretty neat, right? This weapon is truly versatile since you can infuse it with multiple Ashes of War and choose the affinity you prefer. I recommend going with Dexterity affinity because it's the best option to get the max AR possible with this blade, especially if you like a simple playstyle. This way you can also coat the weapon with Blood Flame Blade or apply any other weapon buff you wish. Its default skill, Blind Spot, is quite useful and can help you get out of complicating situations while also dealing a lot of damage simultaneously. I know all of that sounds great, but this weapon has another cool feature that deserves to be mentioned. It has the strongest guard boost in the game, making it a perfect weapon to combine with the Deflecting Heart Tear and Royal Knight's Resolve. The guard counter animation of this weapon deals multiple hits, so using the bleed affinity is a great option because this way we deal tons of damage while building up bleed at the same time. By doing this, we constantly punish the target. The only downside of this setup is that it requires practice to be used effectively, and the only weakness of the weapon itself is that its stance damage isn't the best, and the power stance moveset is not as fast as you might think. Don't get me wrong, it's good, but it could be slightly faster. Number 16. Death's Poker. Somehow people tend to sleep on this weapon for no reason at all. It's one of the craziest greatswords available in Elden Ring's base game, which means we have had this weapon since 2022, and yet only a few players are fully aware of its true potential. Death's Poker can handle any situation like a boss. It deals both physical and magic damage, and it scales with dexterity, strength and intelligence, intelligence. It has a unique R2 attack shared with the Sword of Milos, and it builds up Frostbite incredibly well. But the real deal with this weapon is its unique skill, Ghost Flame Ignition, a beautiful ability that offers two different variations. The light input of the skill leaves a trail of Ghost Flame that constantly deals damage and builds up Frostbite insanely fast. As I see it, this is the most effective variation, and it is disgusting against big targets. On the other hand, the heavy input creates a giant Ghost Flame explosion that sends light enemies flying like crazy. It's a great attack too, but nothing compared to the light input, which is just absurd when used correctly. Now here comes the tricky part. Ghost Flame Ignition deals only magic damage and scales only with the weapon's upgrade level and intelligence. But isn't intelligence the worst scaling stat on this weapon? Yes, it is! And yet somehow leveling up intelligence still gives you the best damage when using this ability. I really don't understand why the game misleads players with its own scaling data. It makes people believe the weapon isn't good when in reality they are just building it wrong. The only challenging part about using this weapon is landing the skill on fast moving targets like Malenia, Relana or any quick enemy. Outside of that, it's just insanely strong. Number 15. Euphoria. Are we seeing a holy damage weapon in a top 25? Yes dude, it's 2025. That holy damage drama is so freaking old by now, get good little bit. Nah, I'm just kidding. Holy damage still isn't your best choice for the base game, not because it's bad, but because late game bosses have extremely high resistance to it, making it not quite as effective. Still, there are a bunch of holy weapons that counter this downside with split damage like the Ordovis's Greatsword, the Golden Order Greatsword, or in this case the Euphoria. This Twin Blade is a late game unique weapon from the DLC. To get it, you need to reach the final area of the expansion after defeating Romina. So yeah, it's not easy to obtain, which means any player would expect it to be an absolute beast in almost every scenario. Sadly, it wasn't like that for a long time. The complaints about this Twin Blade got so loud that it didn't take long for the devs to buff it. We were all expecting a relevant change for this blade and they didn't disappoint. Instead, they decided to inject steroids on this thing, because now it is beyond broken. This weapon has a unique buffing system that rewards an aggressive playstyle. The more hits you land on your targets, the stronger the weapon gets. I actually love this kind of weapon because it encourages the player to take risks, which makes for a more enjoyable and intense gameplay experience. Each stage of the buff increases the weapon's power and affects both the damage and duration of the Euphoria Vortex, this weapon's unique skill. This is one of my favorite abilities in the entire game. It lasts forever and deals so much damage that it's very likely nothing will survive to this wild laser beam. In addition, thanks to the buff they applied, you now only need 2 fully charged heavy attacks to reach the max stage of the buff, which lets you unleash the skill super early in fights. The weapon's only real flaw is that it deals holy damage, so it might struggle a little bit against late game bosses in the base game, but honestly it doesn't struggle that much. Number 14. Hand of Malenia. You got me, I'm a whip. No dude, but for real, this has to be one of the most underrated katanas in Elden Ring. I know it's not the easiest one to use, but it's incredibly OP. It has fantastic base damage and scales only with dexterity. It does scale a bit with strength, but it's not worth investing in that stat above the weapon's requirement. This katana has almost the same range as the Nagakiba, which makes it perfect if you don't like hugging the boss's cheeks. But what really puts this weapon in the S tier category is that it features the full waterfall dance as its unique ability. To me, this increases the value of the weapon over other remembrance weapons with floppy abilities that aren't even close to their respective boss version. In this case, the ability is just as deadly as the original waterfall dance, but with the added bonus that it's subdivided into 3 inputs. That means you can perform the attack partially, which is incredibly useful against difficult bosses like Consort Radan or any other boss that doesn't give you enough time to punish them. What I like to do is land a few heavy hits first to build up stance damage, and when I feel like I'm about to break their stance, I unleash the full skill, and in most cases, I do break them. That allows me to finish the entire move without being interrupted, take 0 damage, and completely obliterate the boss's HP bar. If that wasn't enough, this katana also has great passive bleed build-up, which pretty much guarantees a bleed proc every time you use the skill thanks to the motion values of this multi-hit attack. The only real downside is that it's not as easy to use as some other weapons on this list. If the hyper armor during the ability was a bit stronger, this katana will definitely be top 10 material. Number 13. Star Fist. There might be some controversy here, but from my perspective, this is the best fist weapon you can use from scratch all the way up to NG+7. The Golden Fist is also amazing, but is significantly slower, stupidly stamina hungry, and way less consistent. Not gonna lie, sometimes that weapon might seem better, but that's rarely the case, especially in the later New Game Plus cycles. The Star Fist, however, has multiple factors I want to point out, and they'll explain why, to me, this This is one of the strongest weapons in Elden Ring. First of all, it's a very simple weapon, a paired fist weapon, and you can get it super early just by stepping into the capital. You don't even need the DLC to use it. It works amazingly well with heavy affinity, reaching an A scaling in strength, which gives you the best AR possible for any affinity on this weapon. It shares the same art to attack as the iron balls, the shaped ones, but in general both weapons are the same, with one big difference: the star fist deals significantly more damage. Now here's the thing about that art to attack and why it's so important. Fully charging it is extremely fast. Sometimes using 2 fully charged heavies from this weapon is actually faster than 1 heavy from most other weapon classes. This thing is an absolute DPS monster. You will need a good chunk of endurance, but it's a solid trade because spamming those heavy attacks can erase bosses in seconds. Now combine this with Crackblade, the Axe Talisman, the Spike Crack tier, and multi-hit buffs, and you have got one of the easiest builds to break Elden Ring's difficulty. But great power comes with great downsides, or something like that. I think Uncle Bait said it, or maybe it was about waifus with iron balls, whatever. Anyways, the Star Fist has very short range, like really short. Sometimes you'll think you are close enough to hit a boss, but you are not. You need to get even closer, so don't be afraid. Get up in that boss's face you are so scared of. I promise it's gonna be alright. Number 12. Bloodfiend's Arm. What would this game be without bonk machines? Weapons that require nothing more than the desire to smash a giant piece of something into a living creature. Well, that's exactly what we get with the Bloodfiend's Arm, also known as the chicken leg. I really don't know where you are seeing the chicken leg resemblance though. I recommend changing your fried chicken dealer. Whatever you are eating might just trigger another world-ending event. But who am I to criticize your food when this video is about broken weapons? And holy moly guacamole, this thing is absolutely disgusting. It's a colossal weapon with amazing base damage, and it features a unique slam art to attack, the same one shared with the Great Club. It has awesome strength scaling, and you might be tempted to lean into that, but I need you to take a look at its name. Yeah bro, it's called Bloodfiend's Arm for a reason. It's meant to be used with blood affinity. That's basic math, dude. For some reason, when using this weapon with blood affinity, the art to attacks create an AoE explosion, dealing bonus damage and building up even more bleed, on top of the bleed you're already doing with the weapon's regular hitbox. And if you think I'm exaggerating, just check the massive bleed build-up this thing gets just by being a colossal weapon. These dudes at From Software like it big, and so do I. And if that is still not enough to convince you, the stance damage this thing deals is disgusting. They've actually nerfed this weapon a few times, and it is still ridiculously broken. There is no boss tanky enough to make this thing feel obsolete. The only downside is that as a colossal weapon, the recovery time between actions is considerable, so be careful when going for fully charged heavies. You don't want to be the guy getting your skull bonked instead. Number 11. Great Katana. Speaking of how good the big things are, just imagine a katana but twice as long and thick. That's commonly known as a nodachi or nodachi. This weapon have the same shape as a regular katana, just on a much bigger scale. I don't know how effective that was in real life, but I guess not as good as the little boy. In any case, take all the good features of a katana and paste them onto this fantastic weapon class. They have longer range than greatswords, all of them are pretty good, lighter in most cases, and considerably faster too. But the one that's actually overpowered is the regular Great Katana, the one you can get right at the start of the DLC. Since it's infusible, this weapon opens up a massive world of possibilities. It comes with a unique Ash of War called Overhead Stance, which is basically triple Ichimonji. Yeah, that's something very original from our From Software friends. And I'm just kidding, it's actually a great skill. It has 2 variations, a single slash and a triple slash, which is why I made the Ichimonji joke. But guess what? This ability is a stance skill, which means it gets dramatically buffed by the Relana's Cameo Talisman. In some cases, this obliterates bosses in seconds, and I say in some cases because the skill is so fast that spamming the triple version can be more effective. Even so, this skill shares a big downside with the weapon itself. Most attack deals slash damage, so it can struggle against heavily armored enemies, just like most other katanas and slashing weapons. Nonetheless, that's exactly what makes this weapon stand out. Because it's infusible, we can change the Ash of War to something more pokey, more penetrating, like Blood Tax, an ability that gets a 15% boost from the Ansbach set, making it an amazing alternative when facing difficult scenarios. I'll always recommend using the Great Katana with physical affinities, heavy, keen or quality. Since I like to run level 200 builds, quality is the best for me, but it works fantastic with heavy and keen as well. This way you can buff it with whatever you want. My favorites are Blood Flame Blade and Black Flame Blade. In simpler words, what a cool weapon. A great katana indeed. Number 10. Rivers of Blood. I didn't imagine my beloved will make it into the top 10, but here it is. The Rivers of Blood, a weapon a lot of people now consider useless. Like, what are you on, my guy? I know it's been nerfed multiple times, and yeah, you get it a little late in the base game, but come on bro. Are we gonna ignore the fact that this thing shreds bosses in NG plus 7 like it's the first playthrough? The Rivers of Blood is probably the most hated katana in the history of gaming, because back in the early days of Elden Ring, this thing was actually broken. And I mean broken. It was heavily abused in PvP, PvE, and probably probably even in PvC. It didn't take long before it got nerfed, and then nerfed again. But even after all that, it's still one of the best weapons available in Elden Ring. It deals physical and fire damage and scales with dexterity and arcane. Basically, it's a bleed katana, and my favorite part of it is its unique skill, Corpse Piler. That double slash combo with trails of blood. It melts bosses in mere seconds. I love this weapon so much because it's been treated like trash and it still stays solid like a rock. And guess what? In the DLC, they actually showed mercy and buffed this thing. Well, not directly, but Corpse Piler is now on the list of abilities boosted by the Ansbach set, which means that when you wear that armor set, you will deal 15% more damage with it. Combine that with the multi-hit talismans and bleed buffs and you have got a reincarnated Rivers of Blood, and it's beautiful. The major downside, it devours stamina. Literally, using Corpse Piler will drain your stamina bar insanely fast, so you really have to be aware of what you are doing. You don't want to be attacking like crazy and then suddenly your weapon just stops working because you ran out of green juice. As you can see, I love the Rivers of Blood. Number 9. Blasphemous Blade. This greatsword is the definition of an extraordinary unique weapon. The more I play with it, the more I love it. The Blasphemous Blade can be obtained very early in the base game. It doesn't require much effort and it's incredibly easy to use. It deals physical and fire damage and scales with faith, with some minimal scaling in strength and dexterity. My advice, don't go investing more than what the weapon requires in strength or dex. The best way to build this weapon is by cranking fate up to 60, 80 or even 99 to get the maximum fire damage possible. This weapon is easily one of the best blades in the game for two big reasons. It deals insane damage and it makes you practically unkillable. That's because it has a passive healing effect that restores chunks of your HP every time you defeat an enemy. But wait a little bit cause it gets better. Its unique skill, Taker's Flames, deals a ridiculous amount of damage and heals you each time you hit an enemy with it. Yes, you heard that right. You don't even have to kill the enemy, just hit them. Every successful hit with Taker's Flame will restore 10% of your max HP plus 150 flat HP. This skill deals purely fire damage and scales only with the weapon upgrade level and your fate stat. That's why fate is so important here. Also, if you actually defeat an enemy with this skill, you will trigger both killing effects at the same time, recovering an absurd amount of HP, sometimes out-killing your flask of Crimson Tears. And let's not forget it also benefits from the Talisman of the Dread, which makes it even more busted. Now, it does have one big downside. Since Taker's Flames deals only fire damage, this weapon becomes nearly useless against enemies like Mog or any boss extremely resistant to fire damage. But those cases are very few and far between, so honestly it's not a big deal. Number 8. Sword Lance. If you like the deflecting power of the backhand blades, you are gonna love the Sword Lance. Yes, Commander Gaius's weapon. I bet you didn't even remember that. Me neither. It has all the potential to be a completely forgotten weapon, as it is a heavy thrusting sword and not quite colorful, so it doesn't even catch the eye, you know? It's an infusible weapon which increases its versatility, but if you want the highest AR possible, Heavy Affinity is your best option. Even if that sounds interesting, I need you to stop from playing this weapon the wrong way. I know that there is no such thing, especially considering this blade is infusible and gives you the free will of choosing how to play it, but I will not forgive myself if I don't tell you the secret sauce of this weapon. So just like with the backhand blade, this one has a destructive guard boost, actually the second best in the entire game, the first one being the backhand blades. Then if that is the case, why is this weapon ranked higher than the backhand blades? It's a lot simpler than you might think. The Sword Lance is a bigger weapon, so its base damage is already better, and its guard counter animation is a lot faster and easier to execute, and if we take into account the fact that it deals pierce damage, it's overall more effective than the slash guard counter of the backhand blade. That means this weapon has everything we need to dominate the game with it. Its biggest flaw, it might not be as good if you want to play it in a more simple playstyle. In that case, it's probably better to just go for a Colossal Sword or a Greatsword. However, the fact that it deals pierce damage consistently makes it an amazing weapon to face bosses like Consort Radahn, Romina or Relana. Number 7. Milady. What an amazing weapon class the light greatswords are. These weapons are the perfect fusion between style and deadly damage. Their moveset, abilities and playstyle in general grant a refreshing experience in this game. The Milady in particular is the best one in my opinion. Its moveset is by far my favorite light attack combo, so fast and destructive it makes you addicted to it. The fact that it is the earliest light greatsword we can get in the DLC makes it so much better. And as early as this weapon can be obtained, we can also get its unique skill. Why am I saying that this weapon has a unique skill if it's basically an infusible weapon? Well, because our dear From Software friends created an Ash of War that can only be used with this weapon. Wing Stance is a fantastic ability with two main variations, a light multi-hit combo and a heavy leaping thrust attack. Both attacks are amazing, but the coolest part is that you can chain both in one single combo, creating a wild chain point of massive destruction. And as it can clearly be seen in its name, this unique skill is a stance ability, which means it gets buffed by the Relana's Cameo talisman, making this weapon an extremely overpowered machine. The Milady, however, doesn't make it clear which is the best affinity to use, as none of them seem to scale extremely well with any particular stat. I guess you can't go wrong if you choose any of the physical affinities to play around dex or strength characters, but if you are looking to get some real damage numbers, your first option should be the Flame Art affinity. This way you can focus on leveling up Faith, making this blade a blazing ember weapon. You might be thinking that even if it's a good idea, what will happen when facing bosses that aren't weak to fire damage? Well, unlike the Blasphemous Blade, this one is an infusible weapon, which allows us to change the affinity as much as we wish. So against fire resistant enemies, just swap the affinity to Sacred. This way you can dominate almost the entire game. Number 6. Falx. It's pretty funny having a dual curve sword setup by only acquiring one weapon. Man, it's actually one of the best things the DLC brought to the game. This one is pretty similar to the Dancing Blades of Rana, but instead of relying on the power stance moveset, the Falx has something so much better to offer. It deals only physical damage and scales only of dexterity. Though it's basically the same as the Dancing Blades, this one has a notably higher AR, and even if it has a B scaling on dexterity instead of A, the damage of this weapon is just a lot better. I know it sounds like I'm roasting the other one, but I'm just trying to explain why it might feel weird that one weapon with technically lower scaling values is stronger than the one that is supposed to be the best. Not to mention the Falx has already a good passive bleed build-up, a feature the other blade doesn't even have. Anyways, what matters here is that this weapon's unique skill, Revenger's Blade, is a game changer. This ability is one of the most stylish and aggressive attacks available in Elden Ring. It's not extremely easy to use, but it's not close to being difficult either. It's perfect to close gap with enemies, it quickly reaches the max stages of the successive attacks buffs, and in the same way as Malenia's Waterfall Dance, it will guarantee you a bleed proc per execution. I recommend landing a few hits with the power stance moveset to charge your multi-hit buffs and then rushing in with the skill. And the only thing the bosses will see is a storm of slashes draining their HP bars like butter melting in the morning sunshine, baby. In addition, this attack deals a very decent amount of stance damage, so many times you will be breaking the boss stance while performing this attack. And believe me, breaking a boss stance just to finish them with the final hit of this weapon has to be one of the most enjoyable gaming moments I've experienced in my life. As amazing as it sounds, of course it's not perfect. It has the same problem of struggling a bit with enemies wearing heavy armor sets. It's not as bad as with other weapons on this list, but it's noticeable. Still, if you like to play like a maniac, this might be the ultimate weapon for you. Number 5. Mogwin's Sacred Spear. To be honest with you guys, I didn't even imagine a Great Spear was gonna be here in the Broken tier. Don't get me wrong, but Great Spears are not an extremely popular class, especially when it comes to absolutely busted weapons. Even so, here we are taking a deep look at the Mogwin's Sacred Spear, another weapon from the base game. Is it just me, or have you also noticed that they were very careful with the DLC weapons to not make all of them really OP? Let me know what do you think. This Great Spear is obtained as a remembrance trait with Enya after defeating Mog. It's actually a remarkable weapon. It deals physical and fire damage, it has passive bleed, and it scales mostly of strength and arcane, both on C, with arcane being significantly more relevant since it also increases the bleed build-up. As a Great Spear is pretty solid, deals amazing damage, and is not that complicated to use. However, what really matters here is the unique skill of this weapon, Bloodborne Ritual, better known as Nihil. This is an incredibly strong AoE attack that deals lots of fire damage while building up bleed, covering a giant radius of effect, which means it's perfect to hit multiple targets at the same time or to completely obliterate a single target from your preferred position. It's actually pretty nice as well, because you can perform the skill in parts. You don't get stuck in the triple pierce animation. If you feel you are in trouble, you can dodge out to get into a safe position. Still, be mindful it is not a fast ability. The damage of this unique skill scales with the weapon upgrade level and arcane, so it is a must to level this stat high enough. If built correctly, the Mogwin's Sacred Spear is one of the most disgusting weapons you can try. The most important flaw this weapon has is that it requires you to be fully aware of how and where you're using this skill, because if you're not careful enough, it's almost a guarantee that you're gonna get hit. The key to succeed with this amazing spear is learning the right timings to use the skill and finding as well a good position to use it. Number 4. Fire Knight's Greatsword. My favorite colossal sword in all of Elden Ring. Think about this weapon as an upgraded version of the Zweihander. It has the same unique piercing art to attack, and it also shares the light combo with the Godslayer's Greatsword. In addition, it's an infusible weapon, which lets you decide how you wanna rock it. Before the DLC, the strongest colossal sword was the Zweihander, the only weapon capable of dealing massive damage in a single hit. As I previously established, this weapon is basically the same, but way better in two aspects: the max damage it can reach, which is the most important, and the fact that it has the most devastating moveset in this weapon class. The Fire Knight's Greatsword can be used in multiple ways, but to get the highest damage possible out of this blade, the best thing you can do is go with Royal Knight's Resolve on the Flame Art or Sacred affinity. ability. This, with the right combination of talismans and equipment in general, leads to one of the craziest damage per hit setups ever seen in this game. Nonetheless, if you prefer a faster paced combat style, the best you can do is use Flame Spear or Flame Skewer to get your gameplay closer to the style of a Fire Knight. As you know, being a colossal sword, it requires a bit of practice in order not to get punished by the counterattacks of some bosses. It's also a hard weapon to get, since you have to farm for it by defeating the Fire Knights located in the Shadow Keep until they drop it, but as you can imagine, it's completely worth it. Number 3. Sword of Night and Flame. At this point you might be wondering why in the actual hell is a straight sword inside the top 3. Let me explain it in a nutshell, and I promise you will not judge me anymore. The Sword of Night and Flame has the strongest fire attack in the entire game. You can compare it with any other strong source of fire damage and nothing can outdamage it. Of course, assuming you are comparing them under the same conditions as I did. Basically, all weapons were tested with the same fate values and buffs to see which one gets the max damage. And surprisingly, it was the Sword of Night and Flame. And why is that so impressive? Well, in first place, because it's a straight sword, not even close to being an overpowered weapon class. And because the main feature of the Sword of Night and Flame has always been the light input of the skill. In other words, the comet attack that drains HP bars in seconds. But now having insane fire damage available too in one single weapon gets so close to the nasty ridiculous side of things. If that wasn't enough, guess what? The unique skill of this weapon is a stance ability, which, as you might already know at this point in the video, will be stupidly buffed by the Relana's Cameo Talisman, skyrocketing its damage to the point of almost one-shotting bosses, in max scaling, bro. This weapon is no joke. You can get it quite early and start building it according to your preferences, and by the time you are in New Game Plus, you have got yourself a weapon of mass destruction. Nonetheless, it has important downsides, like the fact that it's quite expensive in terms of requirements to use it, and both variations of the skill leave you pretty exposed if you are not very aware of your target's moveset. As well, you need to know how to build it properly in order to get the max damage possible when using any of its two main attacks. Outside of that, this weapon is just incredibly amazing. Number 2. Nagakiba. What happens when you make a katana so long it outranges some of the great katanas of the DLC? Well, you get the Nagakiba, the amazing katana that can dominate Elden Ring from the first playthrough all the way up to max scaling, with the main difference being that it's extremely easy to use and so versatile it's perfect for almost every playstyle. Thanks to its amazing range, you can land hits from odd positions you wouldn't normally use as a melee player. Moreover, it features a unique piercing R2 attack that, combined with its ridiculous range, can make for the cheesiest hits you can imagine. In the same way, it works incredibly well with almost any affinity. Bleed tends to work better from the first playthrough to NG plus 3, while Kin Affinity works better from NG plus 4 to NG plus 7, as you can coat the blade in amazing buffs that are not affected by motion values, such as Blood Flame Blade or Black Flame Blade. The best part of using double slash with Blood Flame Blade is that we also preserve the passive bleed build-up of the katana, stacking a bunch of bleed per hit and dealing a lot of damage even in the most difficult scenarios you can imagine. Because of this, there is a debate about which weapon is better, the Rivers of Blood or the Nagakiba. And to be honest, I prefer the Rivers of Blood, but just because it's the Rivers of Blood. But the Nagakiba is a lot better. It outdamages the Rivers of Blood in most scenarios, it has better range, and it can be built according to your needs across different situations. You can do that with the Rivers of Blood. You are basically tied to the weapon's properties, and that can make it struggle against certain enemies. For instance, Rivers of Blood, like many weapons on this list, deals less damage against heavily armored enemies, while the Nagakiba, with its unique R2 attack, can punish those bosses easily and from a safe distance. Also, when facing fire-resistant enemies, the Rivers of Blood will be punished, while the Nagakiba won't. So as you can see, it's not complicated to realize which one is the best katana in Elden Ring. Number 1. Marae's Executioner's Sword. Yeah dude, what did you expect to see here? Your stupid Smithscript dagger? No! This amazing greatsword is all the good things in the entire world gathered into one single, well-crafted piece of magic metal. Yes, as weird as it sounds, this weapon deals a small amount of magic damage. Pay attention, it deals magic damage. I didn't say it scales with intelligence. Indeed, it scales only with strength and arcane, making it one of the most unique weapons in this fantastic game. Strength will grant you the main portion of its damage, but arcane is also extremely important. As you can see, this weapon deals stupid damage, so stupid that many people think it's fake. It's not. It's simply the best weapon you can find across the lands between. When used under the right build, its damage can grow dramatically. Initially, there was a popular belief that this weapon dealt bleed because of the arcane scaling. Surprisingly, this weapon doesn't rely on any status effects. It's pure base damage and fast hits. It's obvious that the unique skill of this weapon is its biggest feature, but it has other interesting qualities I'd like to mention. It has a unique slamming R2 attack, pretty useful to deal a bit of stance damage before using the skill, and it has one of the best visual designs in the whole game. game, and thanks to its unique skill, its range is way better than a regular greatsword. But now let's talk about Eochaid's Dancing Blade, a piercing multi-hit attack that spins the weapon repeatedly, dealing tons of damage in just a few seconds. How is this skill so strong? It's actually very simple to explain. The weapon has an amazing base damage, and a greatsword is not supposed to hit that fast. Therefore, most players wouldn't think of using multi-hit buffs with a weapon of this class. But now with a skill like this one, that idea isn't crazy anymore. The multi-hit talismans and the thorny tier increase the damage per stage. The faster the player reaches those stages, the better the damage will be. And as this ability is as fast as a machine gun, you can imagine what will happen. Not to mention, Eochaid's Dancing Blade is a chargeable skill, which means it will also be affected by the Godfrey icon. I will say this is the only weapon that can be buffed in every aspect with the most simple build possible. I have no doubts when I say this is the most broken weapon in all of Elden Ring. Let me know what do you think of my choices. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more Elden Ring videos. Have a great day guys, my name's Carlos and I'll see you in the next one.